Hello. So I will be doing my first critical reflection based on the one of the articles for this week called "Preparing for Culturally Responsive Teaching" by Geneva Gay. Um, and just real quick to start, I think it'd be appropriate to say that I really enjoyed this article. I think that it is incredibly crucial and important that people are culturally responsive when it comes to like how we teach as well as how we do ongoing learning ourselves as we learn about other people's cultures and values, traditions, um, and which all leads me right into the part of the article that talked about um, we can't teach what we don't know, and there's so much to learn about culture as well as um, incorporating that into your classroom effectively, not just like um, replacing a person's name with a name from another culture, but th- um, purposefully integrating other people's cultures, whether it's in religion and different educational aspects that help us learn. And that goes beyond just basic information that includes like traditions, communication, language, learning, and just how that plays into the um, idea of the classroom really pushed me personally because I thought of culture responsive teaching more so like um, just being culturally aware, but also realizing that it includes like their learning styles and their values. And that was one thing I learned when I went to Belize for the first time. Beforehand, we were like told that like there was obviously a lot of cultural differences, but not to what extent. And then when we got there, and I met with my teacher, she was like, "You can't wear your earrings as a guy, and like your tattoos can't show, and you have to wear pants because they didn't want to like corrupt the kids, I guess, and they wanted it to be like a positive male influence rather than the negative ones that they so often see in their lives. So just like looking at like their values is really important before you go into a culture, and also when they come into our classroom here in the States. We also have to realize that like it goes beyond the idea of diversity, and that we have different there are different values. There are similar values. There's a lot of very different values that express similar values in a number of different ways. So, like specifically learning about the different details within your students' lives that are culturally like specific would be very helpful. And so, like when I was in my classroom, I learned that they had uniforms because they didn't want the teachers like essentially discriminate based off of wealth and social status. So though the teachers for the most part knew, but there was a student in there that you would never know, but he came from a very wealthy family in Guatemala, which was just like a 5 minute walk from where I was teaching on like the Belize and Guatemala border, and um, I knew this information, so it helped me to know this because he was from Guatemala. He had a stronger, he had a more bigger struggle learning English. So we had to work with him more on his English skills. And so just learning like all information about that, the fact that even though he was rich and from a wealthy family, we still took that into consideration that he was from Guatemala, and that um, it did impact his learning. But that's obviously what we were trying to help him with. Um, we also have to realize that there's so many different communication styles in different ethnic groups, and how like considering that we have to modify the classroom interactions to accommodate that. So like when another student in that class, she long story short, her parents had just gotten divorced like a year or two ago, and she was like the seen as like the favorite from the dad, and the mom was not very happy about that, and because of that, she kind of took out all of her anger on the daughter, and the daughter kind of just shut down, and the daughter was required to like do all the cooking for the kids, for her like two younger siblings, and like helping them with homework and putting them to bed, giving them baths, all that type of stuff, while the mom was actually prostituting herself on the streets But because of all of this shutdown and negativity, she just literally shut down. She was quiet all the time. She never talked. So, learning about their personal lives and how to communicate with them is crucial, because if we don't, obviously that will greatly impact our teaching as well as their learning. That really pushed me as a educator, just seeing that different situation that I'm not used to. But it was helpful to be able to like see the impact that it made, that of my like working with her and be able to communicate with her. Um, there's also a number of ways that when it comes to like instructional techniques and learning styles that the article talked about, making it multiculturalized. That kind of was a little confusing me, but like I came to realize, thinking in a different perspective, that not just like looking at cultures and studying them and be like, okay, we're good for like the month or the year or whatever, but like in depth, like going into cultural differences within the classroom, especially like represented within the classroom, whether it's Middle Eastern, Southeastern Asian, European, Central America, Canadian, inner city, Cleveland, whatever. That there is a multitude of ways to like to convey multiculturalism, and that if when you do that, you also have to take into account the learning styles and the instructional techniques that you incorporate, so that make sure that it is culturally responsive, but it's also conveying like the sense of academic and intellectual qualities that you're trying to convey. Which brings me to the last point of the article that it talked about, as well as I really thought resonated with myself as well as future educators, and really pushes me, and I feel like it should push all of us to really sit down and think about what we want our teaching to be like, and realizing that cultural scaffolding is incredibly important to expand horizons. But going beyond the scaffolding, you need to start at a foundation of realizing that if you are culturally sensitive and caring, and helping build the like learning community that you are trying to foster, that the rest of the year will not only be a success, but there will be a sense of growth. This article touched around that, like tiptoed all around it, and then it finally just came out straight up. So like specifically making relationships with all your students beforehand, getting to know their names, even just small things like not always having a serious face on your face, but like smiling and fostering a community that is encouraging and inclusive, but also one that is going to show intellectual growth as well as academic knowledge. So I feel like this article was amazing. It really did shed some light on how culturally responsive teaching can be difficult, but if you are intentional, I feel like intentional is a very good word. If you're intentional about it, and if you are smart with how you actually convey some of the information, and you are also culturally aware yourself, then it will make your life easier, as well as helping other students like know what you're trying to learn, and to realize that we can't always teach what we don't know, but if we obviously learn ourselves, then it will help the students learn, and it'll ultimately shape all of our ideas for teaching, that will help develop us into good teachers. I think this article and my experience teaching internationally will help me as I pursue my calling to teach internationally. I would love to actually go back to Belize or Nicaragua or somewhere in Central America to teach English as a single language. So that is my critical reflection, and yeah.